Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for being here. Today's going to be a little bit different. Instead of talking about the industry and what's going on in tech, maybe Starlink, maybe some SpaceX stuff, today's going to be spacey, but a little bit different. We're going to have a special guest on today. We're going to have we won't call it an interview, let's say a chat with an amazing director. His name is Justin Barber. He's absolutely incredible when it comes to putting together a short film. Let's call it, it's not really a documentary, let's call it a DocuFilm. The story kind of reached me on multiple levels. Not only was it a really good DocuFilm, perfect for watching in a movie theater, but it was also very patriotic in comparison to many other shorts that we saw at that fest. It's called Space Coast. Matter of fact, maybe we'll eat some Astronaut ice cream while we're at it, but we're going to have Justin here to talk about what went on. How was this actually produced? What went into it? And some of the behind the scenes that hopefully he can share with us. And we're going to have Fabiola with me. So instead of just me seeing this talking head, you'll be able to see not only Justin, but Fabiola at the same time. So before we bring Justin on, I just want to say that if you enjoy this content, even a little bit, throw it a thumbs up. That would be very helpful. Don't forget to subscribe if you're not. If you are, thank you so much. Click this little button over here so when I go live, when a new video comes out, you'll be notified of it immediately. And if you want more Starlink content or space content in general, Elon content, take a look at my playlist. I have a Starlink playlist. Maybe I'll put a link over here. When you're done watching this video, check that out. Also, if you want to say thank you for all of my hard work, there's a little button down here that says thank you. Click on that, give $1 or $2 if you like. If not, that's perfectly fine. Consider becoming a member of the channel. That would be even better. And finally, if you're looking for a VPN, look no further. Check out PureVPN. The nice folks over there gave us a promo code, which is JCristina, or you could use the URL JCristina.com. At checkout, you're going to get an additional 15% off. So, without further ado, let's hear from Justin Barber.
When there's a launch, there's something very, very, almost soulful. It really sets the tone for life. That there's something going on that's larger than what we're doing.
Space
That's
Coast.
Awesome.
Amazing film. It was a short. We ended up seeing it just, about a month ago now? Maybe 3 weeks ago or
like
somewhere around there now?
Sarasota Film Festival.
Yeah.
Sarasota Film Festival. It was awesome.
It was
Absolutely
a lot of
awesome.
fun. And
I try to say that it's a big short. You know?
Yeah, I was going to say.
It was a long
It's a big short about an enormous rocket.
I was going to say, like, it felt like
Yeah.
a dynamic.
Yeah, it is a
you know?
short, but the goal was just try to make something as cinematic as possible.
It's almost like a feature film.
Yeah.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
brief.
Yeah.
It feels like a feature film when you watch it, though,
Yeah.
but it is short. And the thing there was like, you know, I wanted to make this documentary, and in this day and age, who's really watching a 90-minute, 2-hour-long documentary? I know the opportunities to distribute it might be less if it's this shorter running time, but it was the best running time for the story. And when you watch it, when the climax happens, I feel like it's just the perfect ride. You know?
Yeah, but people don't have a long attention span anymore. You know, it's like this swipe mentality.
Instant gratification.
Instant
and if it's,
dopamine just on crack. That's what we need as quick as possible.
Everybody I know, they say they watch the first half hour of something on Netflix and then they fall asleep.
Yeah, and then it's it's like get to the point quicker. I mean, even with my shows, but we're at about 20 minutes. People will tell me all the time, I need to get it done. You need to get it done with 4 or 5 minutes, and that's it.
Yeah.
Literally, these people need Adderall. That's all. That because they just can't focus anymore.
I want to know Justin's background.
Well, I was in LA for 16 years. I grew up in Florida, but I was out there working in the film industry. I did a couple of features, but my bread and butter was commercials. I directed TV commercials. I had my own company. And then 2020 happened. Everything got turned on its head. And I moved back to Florida, where I grew up. And that's where I met Fabi. I was working for a news organization down here. And it was just a very weird time in the film industry. I mean, not only were many productions shut down,
Right.
but when they restarted, it was restarted under certain criteria. And if you didn't want to participate in that criteria, you had to come up with something else to do.
Of course.
So I moved to Florida. I started working with the company you were working for, and that's where we met. But also, I realized, it was a time when movie theaters were closing. And it was a time where the state I found myself living in, Florida, was always much maligned on the mainstream news.
Right.
And I had fond memories of growing up here and seeing the space shuttle launches. And driving my car around Florida, everybody had those space shuttle license plates on the back of their cars.
That's right.
Yes.
And so it was a big source of pride for us. And I had left the news organization and I was looking for something else to do. And I just randomly saw a news story about how they were about to roll the Artemis rocket out to the launch pad. And normally
That's
the way
big.
these things works, they have what they call the VAB, the very large building, and that's where they store the rockets at Kennedy. And then they rolled them out to the launch pad. And that was the first time I saw the story about it. I'm like, oh wow, that seems like that might make a great shot for my Instagram page. I wasn't even thinking about doing it as a movie. At that point, I was just wanting to shoot something cool.
Right.
And I knew that the launch was going to be cool. And so I went out there and I planned just to capture the launch, which in and of itself was an interesting project.
Right.
I didn't have access to film it from Kennedy Space Center. I had to film it from off-site. And so in Florida, in that area, there's only so many vantage points you have. And I found this one place that was a bridge. And it was
Because Florida's flat.
completely flat.
So you can't get up high to actually see anything.
And there's no drones allowed in
Right.
the area. So I found this bridge that I could camp out on 24 hours ahead of time to make sure I was in the exact great spot, the highest point of the bridge, to be able to film 10 miles across the
Right.
wetlands there.
That's so cool.
And be just high enough to actually see over the trees into the
Right.
launch pad area. So that was my plan, just to do that one shoot, and who knows what would come of it after that. But then, I'm there for 24 hours. I'm with all these other nerds and all these
Right.
other people who came out to see it, and this great environment. And then they're counting down the rocket, and then they say, "Oh, sorry, we got a hydrogen leak," and they cancel the launch.
That's the worst.
That happens all
I
the
know.
time.
Yeah. And it was kind of a bummer. And then I went out there to do it again a couple weeks later, and the same thing happened.
Canceled.
It canceled. But, apart from being a little annoyed, I realized, there's actually a story here. When they try to launch it a couple times and fail, that's actually getting interesting to me now.
Right.
It's like, well, what's
Why?
going on there?
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's people here who are rooting for it, but there are also people here who say that the Artemis rocket is a waste of money and a jobs program.
But they're still there.
But they're still there.
Right,
Exactly.
right.
And so that was kind of the soup that was really interesting me. And that's how I knew there was going to be a story there. Also, and this is kind of a key thing, I think, for people when you're looking for projects, stories you want to tell. There's something in dramatic storytelling we call the time bomb element. Every movie, it's a trope in movies where they're counting down to something at the end. They call it a time bomb element in screenwriting and in dramatic storytelling because it's just a real way to help drive your narrative forward. You know what the ending is.
Right.
If you know what the ending is, it's easier to write the middle than the beginning.
Right.
So that's how I knew that the Artemis launch was going to be a good project. I knew what the ending was. As soon as you show that first shot of the rocket, people are going to want to see it either take off or
Right.
not.
Right.
And the story that happens in between.
Yeah, so it's kind of built in, and that's what made it an attractive project. So that was kind of the genesis of it, not really knowing what I would make with it. But then the last, I think, kind of piece that fell in to make it a good story was I met this character who you see. He drives this yellow vehicle in the movie. You'll see it in the trailers.
Yeah, right.
Good morning. We are T-minus 6 hours from liftoff of the world's most powerful rocket. And we're excited to get started.
There is no type. I mean, I've talked to people from Great Britain, Australia. Some of them have never seen a launch.
I'm hopefully, fingers crossed, going to see my first launch. Artemis is basically Apollo 2.0, but this time we're going to the moon and then we're going to the Mars.
This is Artemis Launch Control. Launch Director Jessica Scrub.
They seem to be taking a long time just to get to the moon.
Well, for the second time this week, NASA's Artemis rocket did not fly.
I'm sorry, but that's just how engineering works.
We have to believe that something good is going to happen in this world.
Holy. Oh my God.
we were just out there prepping to shoot the launch, and this character drove by, and
That's so
he had this
awesome.
interesting vehicle. I'm like, oh, well, that's got to be a shot.
Right.
And then we're all just kind of hanging out watching the Artemis launch, and he's kind of telling us stories about his career. And it turns out that this guy Mark had worked in the space shuttle program for years and had seen all the ups and downs of it. And he had a unique perspective on Artemis as well. And he had kind of an emotional story about it.
Gotcha.
And so after capturing the launch finally, which was very exciting, but then filming my interview with him, then I had all the pieces actually to tell that story that makes the launch, when it finally happens, emotional, because
Right.
you're experiencing it through his point of
Right.
view. So I didn't at all plan to make this movie the way I made it. It was really a lot of things kind of falling into place, which is not normally how it works.
It's
But
nice. It
yeah.
kind of came together very organically for you.
And it really was just sort of throwing the dice, because I quit my job. I had nothing else going on. We just had COVID. Everything was
Right.
terrible.
Yeah.
So it was one of those projects where it's like, well, I got nothing to lose. I went all in on it.
Yeah.
And it actually ended up paying off.
And
So,
instead of you
yeah.
actually bringing in people for the movie, it's almost, I feel like you met people, characters
Yes.
that were so unique and interesting
Yeah.
to help tell your story
Definitely.
when you were there just hanging out with a
Stroke
whole
of
bunch of
luck.
nerds.
Yeah.
You know,
Which
so
is kind of cool because that's what I think of when I see this shot. You know?
It's just a bunch of interesting characters.
right, you had the rabbi in there,
Yeah.
you have him, which actually worked on the space. So I'm like, the space shuttle is near and dear to my heart, because when I was growing up, there was a lot more patriotism with the U.S., within the U.S. and within its people, right? So whenever a launch was to happen, I was in school. I remember whenever a launch would happen of a space shuttle, they would literally shut down the classroom, the CRTs, the big TVs hanging on the wall would come on with NASA. You would see NASA, and then we would sit there. If it was a delayed launch or if it literally went right away, we would sit there for an hour, or if we sit there for 4 hours and watch the space
Right.
shuttle launch. It was that much of a big deal.
System activated. T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 3, 2, 1, 0, and liftoff of Space Shuttle Atlantis on a mission to build, resupply, and to do research on the International Space Station.
Houston now controlling. Atlantis begins its penultimate journey to shore up the International Space Station. Atlantis now on the proper alignment for its 8.5-minute ride to orbit. 4.5 million pounds of hardware and humans taking aim on the International Outpost. 30 seconds into the flight. Atlantis almost 2 miles in altitude, almost 6 miles downrange from the Kennedy Space Center already, traveling 500 miles an hour.
For us, it was a sense of pride
Yeah.
that this was happening. And I feel like the Artemis is almost that sense of pride again, but almost like bringing the old back to the new, kind of.
Yeah, that's definitely part of the story and part of what I was exploring, because we definitely live in less patriotic times. And I did, after working in Hollywood and then working in news during COVID, I definitely was motivated to make something that would just put a smile on people's faces, make people proud, uplift all Americans.
Right.
Right.
And then the challenge is, well, the Artemis rocket is going to be the symbol for this, but it's not all it's cracked up to be. The Artemis rocket, it's competing with Starship. I think everybody knows that. They're the same kind of class rocket, and they can kind of do the same thing. And there is some dramatic tension there, because if they can't get a successful Artemis launch before they have a successful Starship test, what do you think they're going to do to Artemis? It's
Right.
You have Elon, against NASA.
Yeah. But it's hard for us to have patriotism in Starship because it's the billionaires' rocket in a way.
Right.
And so I was kind of turning my lens onto NASA and what they're doing. And what I found was what attracted me about it was that the Artemis rocket, when you look at it, you will recognize things that you recognize from the space shuttle, the boosters, the color of the tank. And when you go deeper, you realize is that they're actually recycling parts from the shuttle program to make this Artemis rocket. And to me, it had this sort of phoenix from the ashes aspect to it.
Right.
And I mentioned this before, but there is a trope in movies. And the only good example that comes to mind is the movie Pacific Rim. So forgive me for nerding out for a minute.
I love that
Yes.
movie.
Okay, but in Pacific Rim, the trope is that they have to kind of get the old robot out of mothball storage
Right.
and fix it up so it can be the champion again.
Yeah.
And that sort of phoenix from the ashes, it's a dramatic trope. And I knew there was a storytelling there with that. And visually, just there's even a sequence in the movie where I show how you rearrange the parts of the shuttle to get to Artemis. But to your point about patriotism, yeah, it's like the Artemis rocket is not all it's cracked up to be. I leaned into that to show that, you know, our country's not all it's cracked up to be. And there's all this doubt and this crisis of faith that many people have. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to tell a story that was sort of for people who had a crisis of faith.
Right.
And to show that, okay, it's this kind of crappy rocket, but it's still going to do something amazing and it's still going to represent something amazing. That's kind of what the movie's about.
And it's bringing people together.
Yeah, exactly.
You know? Even like you said, you had these people that were like not all into it, but they were still there.
And they're there.
Yeah, that was the other thing. It's like I met all these people who showed up to see the rocket and they were all emotional about it. And for some people it was, oh, well, my dad actually worked on the Apollo missions. That's why I'm here. For this one character I met, Ellie, she was a local news reporter. And then she started seeing rocket launches and decided to change her career and do independent journalism for YouTube. And that's what she does now.
Okay.
So exploring all these people's like emotional investment was something that I was very interested in too.
It almost has become like a cottage industry, right? Especially even with SpaceX, right? Everyone's watching the launches continuously. I do lives on the launches. It's a really big thing.
It's like spectator sports for nerds.
Right, exactly, right? Do something that is more on the lines of the, let's say, the timeline of what Elon does to that. Where, you know, NASA would take 10 years, Elon would take 10 months. Well, there's a problem. You need to come together and somehow fix that. And I feel like hopefully we can see that happen with the rocket, and they actually do start speeding things up. Artemis 1, 2, 3, so on and so forth, maybe landing on the moon. We talked about, I don't know if they will land on the moon or if they end up using Starship for landing on the moon, however they do it, but become a piece of that puzzle, I think is really important. And I think, like you know, back to the patriotism, I think that it's important that people get into it.
I was going to say, I feel like that's a big missing part. We grew up with that, like that, you know, and that's missing now because everybody is so involved in technology and they kind of have their head in their phone all the time. This is a very big, like, it's big, you know? And then I'm going to get to that part of conspiracy theories. People don't think that we ever landed on the moon. So
some people think that the Earth is flat still.
Well, I mean, this is true, but, you know, for us, we live here, we grew up with that. You were there, you've seen how this stuff, there's plenty of people that also have seen it, but when you feel that out there, how can you sit there and say, this doesn't happen?
When the rocket goes off, and you can
conversely, though, I can see how if you're not there, you could say that. Because who trusts anything these days? Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, when you're there and you can feel it in your chest. I mean, from miles away.
The physicality of it. Yeah, you know, once you see it.
There's no way to deny that. You know,
that was another main genesis of the movie was knowing that the launch was going to be a classic cinematic sequence, knowing that it was going to be big sounds, drama, suspense, light, knowing that you could make a theatrical experience. That was kind of a key thing in driving the movie forward. But one thing I wanted to mention that you reminded me of in terms of the timelines, I was blown away to learn that SpaceX as a company has only been in operation for a little more than a decade. And the Artemis rocket, they have been working on the Artemis rocket for almost as long as Elon has had his entire company. It's like the life of SpaceX. You know, look at what they've done in that amount of time. Whereas NASA, it's not just the only thing they do, but they've been working on Artemis that whole time. And to your point, I think it is they need competition to drive.
They need a catalyst. They need something
to drive it forward
to kind of get them to move their asses, so to speak. I think it's important. I mean, you need that, right? Just like with competition, right? You need to have multiple companies doing the same thing. It pushes you. Yeah. It pushes you to not to just iterate whatever the product it is. It pushes you to innovate and do stuff new that is awe-inspiring, you know, instead of that constant iteration of.
I guess the question is, do you need competition from NASA and SpaceX, or do you just need competition from private companies? I think that's what. I think the missions are changing. I think NASA will do more like James Webb Telescope type stuff. Whereas actually getting stuff up there will be other companies. But certainly it's great to go out there and just see people like showing up for this thing. Also keep in mind that this was like the first big event I covered since COVID. So it was the first time I was around other people, and they're all on that bridge, they're all cheering for the rocket. No masks. I mean, a couple, but so that was just a cool thing. I felt like that was something that we needed, you know, just to get us
kind of bring people together again, which is very, very important, obviously.
And now that we don't have less movie theaters, like that's one less way we have people to come together.
So let me just ask you real quick about the process. Like, what I mean, from from beginning to end, like what is that timeline? Like how did you put this together? Not just how long did it take you to create, but then what were the different pieces of the puzzle to actually make this? Obviously, I've done video I'm pro photographer for 20 plus years so I get it, but just kind of share it because some people, they don't know like what goes into it.
Like people don't really understand like, oh, I'm a producer. Oh, I'm a director. Or I do hair and makeup, but like they just see the finished project. They don't
the polish. They don't see what goes on.
They don't see the sweat, the hard work, the tears, the timeline, what goes into it, the hours, for this small amount. Let's say,
share a little bit of that because I think that's interesting.
For a project like this, that is a documentary. Documentaries always tend to be edit heavy. There's a lot of editing that goes on. But just give you a sense of the timeline. So I set out to shoot the Artemis launch, and they tried that 3 or 4 times over the course of a couple months. And that was just about sort of planning the shoot around capturing it. And then the added benefit of the passersby I met became subject in the documentary. But that was just a matter of kind of producing 3 little documentary shoots out in the field. You show up with the gear, you make it happen. To me, the real kind of secret sauce and the magic and the hard work comes in the storytelling. So it's like, anyone can take a great shot of the rocket, but to then tell a long form story, over 20 minutes, half an hour, that's a skill most people have to work on over time. I've had to.
Yeah.
So as far as like telling the story, and to me, that's what makes the launch so good at the end, is that it's at the tail end of a good story. Mm-hmm. And so after capturing the launch and meeting the subject, as I described, the next big step was doing his interview. Now, I'll just tell you a little bit more about him. So his name's Mark. He worked in the shuttle program. And I randomly met him at the launch. And I met him because, he drove by in this vehicle, but then we got to chatting. And we were chatting about Top Gun Maverick because it just came out. And everybody there, they're all space nerds. They all love Maverick.
Space nerds. What else are they going to be talking about?
Yeah. And so we were just talking about Top Gun Maverick. And then he happened to mention to me, oh, yeah, the mission that they fly in Top Gun Maverick is based on a mission flown by one of the astronauts. Yeah. And I'm like, what? And he's like, yeah, you can go see the memorial to him just right over there in that park. So the bridge where I was shooting the Artemis launch from, I walked over to this park where they have a memorial to the lost astronauts. So it's the Columbia astronauts, but also the Apollo 1 astronauts and the Challenger astronauts. They have a nice little memorial there. And I saw the plaque for this other character in the movie. His name's Elon Ramon. Elon Ramon was an IDF fighter pilot who flew this famous mission that is similar to the one in Top Gun Maverick, where they had to fly from Israel to Iraq, bomb a nuclear site, and come back. And he later went on to be an astronaut and fly on Columbia, and he later perished on Columbia. Anyway, he's a big part of the story. So it was then getting that character and then shooting his interview. So we shot the Artemis launch, and then a couple months later, we went back to Titusville and we filmed an interview with him at his house. Mm-hmm. Well, actually, it was an Airbnb, but on screen it portrays his house. And then we just drove around with him. We did some scenes of him in the car. I did some on-the-fly interviews. I spent 1 or 2 days from a documentary standpoint just really gathering his story, getting the beats of his story. And his story is that he achieved the American dream. He grew up in Titusville and he got to work on the space shuttle. And that was the dream of his whole life. And he says that those were the golden years of his life. He was the guy who, this is a cool side story, it was his job and the job of his crew to pack the shuttle before it flew. So they'd load everything on there and load it off afterwards.
The camping trip.
The camping That's trip, awesome. Yeah. So all the food, all their gear, all the experiments, him and his team, they loaded that thing. And one of the things he told me was that every now and then there'd be a specialty item that was to be flown on the space shuttle. For example, one of the lightsabers from the original Star Wars. Oh, wow. George Lucas wanted it flown on one of the space shuttles. And he was the guy who packed it in there. Oh, he got the lightsaber, cool. Put it in there, closed the thing.
So cool.
Yeah, and so stuff like that. He had tons of stories like that. But he also experienced, he had the height of the American dream, and then it became a nightmare because he was involved in the Columbia disaster.
Right.
So really why I wanted to make him a character, the movie's about Artemis.
Right.
I wanted to find people who were very skeptical about Artemis, because everything else that was being made about Artemis was sort of puff pieces, advertising for NASA, that kind of thing. Right. I want to tell a story. So I wanted to find somebody who was like a grouch who hates Artemis.
Right.
Because then I knew that when it launches at the end, that's a good ending.
Yeah.
Right.
And I found this guy who was very skeptical about Artemis, but as you kind of chip away at him during the interview process, you realize that, it's really because he has this emotional baggage from his time at NASA, and that's kind of affecting how he views Artemis.
Right.
And I think that's a very true observation about life and in movies. We actually just watched 12 Angry Men recently. I love that movie. And the characters in that movie, some of them think the guy's guilty because of their own emotional reasons.
Right.
It's not because of what's going on in the case.
Right.
Anyway, so I found an opportunity like that to explore. And the way that just feeds back into the patriotism thing was like, we all have had an experience like Mark, where we fell in love with the country, but then something happened where we lost faith in the country or the institution we work for, whatever.
Right, exactly.
And I wanted to show that no matter how negative or how bad the experience was, the only way forward is to turn that into something hopeful and positive.
Right.
And so that's the kind of the emotional climax of the movie. He gets to see the Artemis launch. But anyway, that is all to say that that's how I discovered the story. And after shooting his interview, I had the Artemis launch in the can. I had all the side characters in the can. And now I had his interview in the can. I had everything I needed to start editing the movie and start getting it on the timeline.
Fleshed out.
Yeah.
Now that's the hard part.
Right.
Because production is great. That's the fun part.
Yeah.
Being trapped alone in a room with all your mistakes, that's like...
For hours on end.
I mean, that's like... It's so awful. Like,
Replay.
But so then it was about a year of editing, sound design, and shooting reenactments to sort of beef up other areas of the movie. So for example, during his interview, he told us a story about how it was his job to take a team of guys and search the landscape in Texas for the space shuttle debris. And that was a very intense part of the story. And I decided, that's going to make a cool reenactment. So later, deep in the editing phase, like I had some placeholder footage in there, but we went and we shot some extras and myself actually in the garb, like combing through the landscape looking for the shuttle tail. So over the course of editing for about a year and reshooting stuff for about a year and sound designing for about a year, because of course you can record the rocket launch. It's not going to sound.
Yeah, you're not going to get all
that. You're getting this. This is the but anyway, so then that got me about a year and a half later. I finally had like a 30-minute cut, and it was pretty good. I shared that with a few like key friends who gave me some great notes, and then got it down to about 23 minutes. Just wanting to make something tight, something that would go scene to scene, something that would feel the way a feature does.
Right.
When you go see documentaries at film festivals, they're boring as hell a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And I'm giving people an exciting theater ride.
Right.
Even though it's a documentary, that's what it is. You got rockets, you got babies, you got all kinds of hurricanes. So then I got to that place about a year and a half later, and I'm feeling good about it. And you have to always give yourself deadlines. Otherwise you'll never get it done.
Forever. Yeah.
And in this case, I did not know where the movie was going to end up after it was made. I thought maybe I just released it on the internet, or maybe I go to film festivals, because in the past I have produced movies that took that course. And the way it works for people who aren't familiar, independent filmmakers make movies, they go to film festivals, they get either good reviews or bad reviews, they win awards. And then based on that clout that you build up at film festivals, then maybe a distributor comes in, like a Netflix or an Amazon, wants to buy what you made and distribute it. That's the goal for every movie, more or less. Obviously, times are changing all the time.
Right.
Anyway, I knew that when I had that long form story, when it was getting to be like 20 minutes, half an hour, I'm like, okay, this is a story, this is a movie, this could be for film festivals. And I picked a couple film festivals as artificial deadlines. So South by Southwest was their deadlines in the winter. And Sarasota, some of the big festivals. I kind of didn't even bother with like the Sundances of the world, because it's a very patriotic movie. It has an IDF fighter pilot in it. You guys connect the dots as to how well it's going to do.
Off them.
Yeah,
no, don't like it.
Exactly,
don't like it.
So anyway, submitted to those festivals, and then felt awful that whole time until I finally started hearing back from a few. And once I got into 2 or 3, then I kind of started to rest easier, knowing it's like, okay, I made something that people can digest and like, and is made to play in theaters.
Yeah.
So that was kind of...
I mean, the sound design on it, I think, is exceptional.
So I ranted there, but hopefully that was kind of in a nutshell the process of making the movie.
I think it's great. Because...
And just in terms of, to give people a sense of costs, because that's what everybody always asks.
Right.
I made the movie almost entirely by myself, shooting, editing, producing, whatever. I hired help here and there. Like when you watch the credits, there are people in the movie, but you're on an independent film, you're carrying it yourself.
Yeah, you're like the head lead bottle washer.
All of it.
You're doing everything.
And I basically, when I was working at the news organization where you worked, I basically just like saved as much money as I possibly could. And even they had a 401k thing where like they help you set aside your, so I put, I did the maximum contribution to my 401k, but really when I left there, I cashed everything out and put it into this movie.
That is amazing.
Which is not good advice.
Guys, don't ever do that.
Yeah, but I was just motivated to, I wanted to make a movie again.
Yes.
But also really just motivated to make something like just good, positive for people, really.
Yeah.
So I don't know, roll the dice on that.
I was just gonna say, sometimes you just have to do stuff. You just take a risk because I mean, nothing is ever 100%, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes it's okay to roll the dice, and if it didn't work out, at least you tried.
Yeah, you mitigate risks, of course, but hey, that's how movies get made.
Yeah, I mean that's how life is.
Yeah.
You know what? I'm going to show some images of you and the camera, and just so you guys get an idea of the amount of complexity and the gear that's involved to do it. And remember, what Justin said, he took like 3, 4, 5, many attempts for actually to capture it. So it's a lot. It's a lot of work that goes into it. Because you're renting the gear.
That's the other thing I was
giving it back.
About,
and then you're renting it and then giving it back.
It's not the kind of project that you can just go shoot with gear you might own. You're shooting.
You can't use your iPhone.
Well, it's funny you say that because we did use every possible type of camera, and there is plenty of footage from the iPhone. Yeah. But as far as specifically the money shot of the rocket, it's 10 miles away from where I was, so that's a rental of a lens. That was the big expense, honestly. It's just a cinema quality telephoto lens for that distance. And we'll nerd out for a minute, but I basically had like a 300 mil area lens and a doubler, effectively 600 mil from that bridge. And I wasn't quite able to make the rocket full frame, but shooting 8K on a red by blowing it up, I'm pretty much all on the launch pad, which I have to say was impressive. However, once we got the rocket launch out of the way, the rest of the movie for the reenactments I had to shoot, I could do FX3. Because those are more traditional scenes. Yeah. So I started out the movie with like Red and Alexa, and then by the end, I'm on FX3 and iPhone, which reflects costs as well. Yeah. But anyway.
Yeah, that's
awesome.
You're talking a lot of. I mean, people don't understand the amount of time, and the thing is in most situations, right? You're capturing something that has a specific timing when it's going to happen, and it happens and you're done. You can plan for it. But with this, you never know if it's going to actually go off or if it's not going to go off.
We definitely had as many cameras on the rocket as possible. That was the other thing. Is like, never have you seen a scene in a movie where an explosion happens and it's just one angle. Actually, a lot nowadays. But anyway, I tried to have as many cameras as I could. Costs were a limiting feature. But for the actual launch, we had a red camera with that 600 mil. I had a red Komodo, which was just getting the wide shot of the bridge vantage, which I think is one of the most beautiful shots in the movie, just because it ended up being a nighttime launch and it lights up the whole sky. But then I also had GoPros that, this is actually a funny story. When I left Los Angeles, we closed my company's office there because COVID didn't make sense to have an LA office. And I inherited all the old camera gear from the office. And it's all junk, like old GoPros, but I used almost every one on the movie.
See?
So I had GoPros. I had GoPros on the bridge, looking back at people, and then I had my niece, my brother's stepdaughter. As I said, I could not get access to film it from Kennedy Space Center, but I could buy tickets. So I bought tickets because you can go view it from viewing sites there. And my brother took his family and the kids, and I put a space helmet on her and a GoPro on an arm, so I could capture what she was seeing, but also see her reaction.
Yeah.
And then, so I even had another guy who I was able to get in with a 7D to another
It's like
position.
covert to try to get this.
Yes, exactly. I mean, but it was not just shots of the rocket. You need shots of people reacting to the rocket.
Right. Yeah.
It's almost more important. And so that was the other challenge, was getting those shots as well. And so the cameras are adding up at this point.
Oh, yeah.
Some of those reaction shots I picked up later. There was a great reaction shot of my niece kind of reacting to the light of the rocket, and that was actually filmed in the backyard. Right. So we did traditional tricks like that, and that goes. I mean, people should know that when they see a documentary, they're not really seeing journalism.
Right.
You're seeing storytelling.
Absolutely.
Right.
You know what? Let me ask you. You ran the camera that actually captured it. So
and the drone simultaneously.
Yeah. So just so you guys understand, to run a camera and capture that type of thing, you had to figure out how to move the camera at the right speed. And then you're probably having to play with different lighting, because as it gets brighter, now you're getting blownouts, and I'm sure there's a lot. And the thing is it happens once for 20 seconds, 30 seconds, and you have to get it right.
Yeah. That was
so
exciting.
How many times did you work on that camera just to get the arc right, the angles?
It was good that it didn't launch the first time, because I probably wouldn't have gotten it. It's this bridge, right? My shooting location was this bridge, and I had to haul this gear up there as well. I couldn't just drive. I'm one person. I can't just park my car and unload it. So I parked at the base of the bridge and had one of those wagons that I loaded. This zoom lens, it's heavy.
Yeah, it's like this.
Yeah.
It's a baby.
And then to your point about operating, to operate a zoom lens smoothly, the longer the lens, the more your frame's going to shake, as you know. So you need a very heavy base that the camera sits on to reduce those vibrations. So you need a good cinema head. So I had one of those nice O'Connor heads for this that you'd use on a film shoot. Fluid head, really beautiful, really smooth operation. It's heavy, but that's that lens and the head in the wagon with the camera gear. I'm like, had to haul it up the bridge by myself. But that was the investment to get the good shot.
Right.
And then for the actual shot, I did practice a couple times. I was there for 24 hours camping out, so I just did like, oh, is it going to go that way? I tried it a few times, watched a lot of previous launches, but the head really was. I did feel good because I picked the right tool for the right shot. Right. It was that lens and that head was awesome. And then the drone, I just popped up there, put the controller down, and then operated the tilt. And I had a rack iris. It was a nighttime launch, so as the rocket goes off, it's a fireball on the ground. And so as I'm tilt, I didn't have to rack focus, fortunately, because we're far enough away, and it was a straight tilt until the end. But I did have to kind of start to tilt and rack iris a little bit as it went, and hope that the drone was like
right. Go from really bright to like a lot. And even so, I'm not happy with the shot because there's tearing on the plume. It's blown out,
But I don't think there was anything I could have done about it. So
I mean, that's what people understand is like once you have a blowout, you cannot repair it. If it's a little bit dark, you can push it, but once there's no data there.
But that's some serious multitasking,
Justin.
It was stressful. But it was fun.
I'm sure it was very stressful. Like I said, it was like 20 seconds, 30 seconds, even a minute, and that was it. It doesn't happen.
But when people watch it, it feels like
amazing.
Like a feature film.
And like I said, the sound of it, the sound design, I think, was really what brought you into it. Besides the visuals, because you really in the theater, I mean, you can feel
it's very impactful. Yeah.
A lot of that time in editing was recreating all that sound because, as we discussed, there is some actual recording in there of it, but it just you're hearing basically when the rocket goes off, it's like millions of explosions at the base of that rocket that's pushing it upwards. So you're hearing like what's almost like gunshots.
Pops.
Yeah, but many of them in a small amount of time. So on the mic, it just sounds like. So I basically just went to town trying to make as much of a sci-fi experience for people. Like for people who know rocketry, who watch the movie, they're gonna be like, it doesn't sound like that. But it sounds like it's a big finish.
Yeah,
it's a big finish for a movie.
I think it's awesome.
The visual and the sound makes it that impactful. So.
But the other real challenging part was then getting that sound into the theater because it's a 5:1 audio mix, so it's a full like a real movie.
Right.
But when you're finishing a movie for film festivals, it's just very hard to get everything technically right for theaters. I'm actually still not sure if I've heard the 5:1 correctly yet.
That's true. And the other thing that really is difficult, and people don't get this too, is when you spend a lot of money on a film to do the actual grade, the color grading, right? The problem is every theater you bring it to is going to have a different projector. Everything's going to be different. So you have a specific look, right? And now all of a sudden you're like, that's not how it's supposed to look. Is that
totally
kind of
we've done 4 or 5 festivals so far. Color-wise, it's different everywhere. And not just like little, it's like a full daylight to tungsten shift almost.
Massive.
Like I put it on at Sarasota, they let me test it, and I was like, oh, this looks like T2. I'm like, kind of like that. But it wasn't the intention.
Right.
So the color's been off. But I think the thing is theaters, like, you don't meet a lot of young people who want to grow up to be projectionists anymore. And it's like an aging thing. But it's so important to so many of us.
I know.
Anyway, sound is, so finishing for theaters, we use a legit, so these days it's called a DCP. Everything that's screened in a theater, if it's screened in high quality, it's got a digital print. I think it's digital cinema print, or DLP or whatever. Anyway, we paid a vendor to make that. So we did the high-end process, but I guess you got to...
just don't use it.
Well, you got to have some... With the film festivals, it's a block of shorts and everyone's going to be technically different. So it's very challenging for them. But it's like, I haven't really seen it in the right projection format yet.
Right. Or sound.
Exactly
the way you recorded.
But it plays good enough for regular.
I think it was amazing.
Yeah, it was
absolutely
awesome. It really
amazing.
was.
So really as far as like I said, I do feel like it's like a film that not only covers the Artemis, but also the Columbia and the whole, that patriotism that we were talking about before. I do feel like you encapsulated it in such a way that you have the one guy that is absolutely upset, really pissed basically that all these people had to die when they really
maybe didn't.
Yeah.
And then you have other people that are younger, like I think she was an engineer, I believe.
She Tal's her name.
Right.
She's an engineer.
And she was awesome.
Yeah.
Right.
Her optimism just beams off the screen.
Your characters had really good stories.
Yeah.
They had, good background, and it was a good mix of different kinds of people.
Yes. So, it was unforced diversity.
Yes.
And I guess when you show up to
I love
shoot...
that. Wait a second. Write that down. Unforced diversity.
Yeah.
Diversity, not for the sake of diversity.
Just because of what it is.
But just because that's the people that were there.
We're there.
For all mankind.
I love that. Yes.
Can you
for all
imagine?
mankind. Can you imagine? Yeah.
Well, yeah, she was great. Ellie was great in it. I met so many people. They all had their own little story. And I guess just when you're going to meet eccentric people, because only eccentric people will show up to that, I guess.
But you even had a little bit of a religious aspect to it too, because I think that's why sometimes people get emotional with things like that.
Yeah.
Just like if you go to listen to people that sing, and it brings out that emotion.
Yeah.
So I think you covered a good wide range of so much, again, impactful in a short amount of time.
Can you share a little bit about the rabbi?
Oh,
I thought he was just, he was a great character too.
Just a wonderful man.
I learned a lot too watching it. I mean, you tend to think because you live here and you see it and we talk about all this stuff, but there was a lot of stuff that I was like, oh my God.
Yeah. Once you start talking to somebody who was really involved in an event, you realize that everything you've seen in the mainstream media coverage is
it's blah.
No, I don't want to say wrong. It's missing.
It's missing a lot.
Unshaded, maybe.
Yes.
Well, with the rabbi, okay, so I had been wanting to do something with the Artemis launch from early on. As I said, even when I was working for the show, I tried to get access to Kennedy Space Center for one of our reporters to go do coverage, and they denied us.
Yeah.
They denied us, and then I left that show, and I was independent, but I still wanted to do the Artemis project, so I kept trying with Kennedy Space Center. I'm like, oh, I'm doing this independently. Can I come get permission? I filled out the form. I called everybody. So they kept saying no, and there was an event at Kennedy Space Center, apart from the Artemis launch, that I wanted to film, and it was the 20th anniversary of the Columbia accident. And so they have a beautiful memorial at Kennedy Space Center there. It's like a cool thing, and I thought, wow, that'll be great, just get some footage for the documentary. And but they kept saying no. And so I show up day of, and I went to the gift shop at NASA, and I bought a jacket that says NASA on the back. And I went to my car, and I got my camera, and I walked into the event. And they didn't even bother me.
Yeah.
They're like, he's with NASA.
Even
Did you see his jacket?
Even to the point where at some point, I told the story, but I'm standing there filming, and I feel like I'm in the way of somebody, as you often are when you're filming. You kind of navigate bodies. And I'm like, oh, excuse me. This woman next to me, I sensed. I'm like, oh, excuse me. I didn't mean to get in your way. And she's like, no, you're fine. Just get your shot. And I looked over at her name tag. It was the woman who said no to me.
That's so great.
And
that is so
I love it.
And so, but it was at that event.
Poetic.
Yeah.
That's
she was very nice, but she had no idea.
Yeah.
But it was at that event. I'm filming it. And it's a series of speakers who get up to speak, and they ring the bell. They've got people in uniform there. And one of the last speakers is this guy, Zvi Konikov, who I recognized from the memorial 20 years ago. Because when Columbia happened, I was just entering college. I was still in Florida. And I remember seeing some of the coverage. And I'm like, wow, he's the same guy. And after the event, I just kind of approached him to chat with him. And he was like so nice and so warm. I didn't really tell him what I was doing because I wasn't really there officially.
But you had the jacket.
I had the jacket.
Yeah. Pretty damn official.
And then I just followed up with him a day later, and he agreed to an interview a couple days later. And I interviewed him right outside the little memorial for Elon Ramon at Sandpoint Park there. And he was just like the coolest guy. Like, man, he said that his kind of approach was to try to Gentiles and people who are not of his faith, he wants to be seen as like a human being first.
Right.
So he's a very easy person to talk to. I love like just religious people and just like, growing up on Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, I wasn't a secular person. I mean, I wasn't a religious person, but I've always loved the literature and like the fables. Anyway, so I'm just into religions. Anyway, I love talking to him, and he told me so much interesting stuff about, it's stuff that I couldn't even fit into the movie.
Yeah.
The most poignant stuff I did, though, he tells that great story about getting word about the accident, which just is mind-blowing. But yeah, just an amazing character. He's the rabbi of the Space Coast, and it's just another example of how I didn't really plan on meeting him or getting him in the movie, But it sounds cheesy, but just kind of by like following my heart, you know, he ends up participating.
But it's just, it's, I don't know, sometimes you think about stuff and steps in your life and you're like, how did I get here?
Yeah.
And like things just work out because that's how it's supposed to be.
I couldn't have planned it.
Right.
Yeah.
So when this thing gets really big, you take that jacket, you put it under glass.
Oh, yes.
That's the jacket right there. Sell it. Sign it.
Sealed.
Well, I do have, well, on that note, actually, this is kind of interesting. I did kind of want to do some show and tell.
Yeah.
So the character in the movie, Mark, who worked on the shuttle program, it was his job to load the shuttle. But one thing that was on board the space shuttle, they had a closed circuit TV system on board so that they could see via video screens in the cockpit what's going on in the shuttle. So they had to, every time the shuttle landed, every time they were prepping for a shuttle mission, they had to run all this AV cable all throughout the shuttle. And they had to bundle it nicely and tape it up there and put labels on it. And it was his job to help out with that. And then after the shuttle came back, they had to pull everything out, you know, because it was like square one every mission.
Start again, right?
So as he would pull out the cables, so he gave these to me. I was
so cool.
I was very touched. But you know, as he was pulling out the cables, he would tear these tags off, and I'll leave a couple with you. But these are tags that were on the video cables on the space shuttle. And he would just kind of pull these off and keep them as keepsakes. So these flew on STS-121 Discovery. Launched on July 4th, 2006, and these flew over 5 million miles in space.
That is amazing.
So and they even dropped off Tom Ryder at the space station, he told me.
Wow.
So we were talking earlier that some people are like, oh, whatever, who cares? But we look at it different, right? Like, we're here, but that was up there.
Yeah.
And it's so
amazing.
crazy.
5 million miles.
Right. And it came back and like it's tangible and you can touch it.
But you know what? Let me just say.
We love that.
Absolutely. And you know what I think is that I think that tells us that says who
it
he
makes
is.
it right, but it also makes it real.
By him saving this, it shows how important it was to him. And I think that's why he was so emotional that they ended up dying on this. And, you know, because he was really,
he was a part of something big.
He wouldn't have saved this stuff unless it wasn't important to him,
right.
you know? So that's when you can now after seeing the movie, I can see how or why he is the way he is in the movie.
Yeah.
You know?
And that isn't to say that his like opinions and emotions aren't very nuanced. Like in the story, in the movie, movies are very simple structurally. Like all movies are about one simple situation, and you can't reflect a real person that way.
Right.
So like I'm definitely hitting the nail on the head very hard in terms of the story and emotional beats in the movie. And anytime you make a movie about a real person, like they very rarely like the movie you make.
Right.
So.
Well, because it's a small scope of who they really are.
Yeah.
You know?
So he probably wouldn't, if you were to sit and talk to him, it wouldn't be as clear, the dramatic beats I'm describing to you, but as filmmakers, that's what we look for.
Right.
But regarding the Columbia crew, I think, you know, his contention is that they should have done more. But then when you read the report and you look at what NASA said about it, they're adamant that there was nothing that could have been done. And so I am not educated enough or an expert enough to say that there was wrongdoing or they could have saved them, etc. What I'm trying to just observe is that this is a character who, like, you know, it's the emotions that are involved in it, and that's why he has hit that.
His love for the program and baggage.
Yeah, and in the movie I show like what his point of view is as to what they did wrong, but I tried to kind of stay within the confines of the accident report, so that, you know, if anybody ever tries to say that like Mark's wrong or NASA's right or whatever, the movie's expressed in such a way to where it's kind of a matter of opinion,
right?
So whether
leaving
they did
it up to the viewer.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure.
Because it's not a movie that's. I just want to say it's not authoritatively supposed to say
not
that
at all.
they could have saved the astronauts.
Right. No, absolutely. Because it's always, you know, there's just multiple ways of looking at it. Is it possible or was it possible? They might have knew something, you know, that, you know, inside of NASA, they might have knew something that they didn't have another means of rescue.
He says, and I'm going beyond a little bit what's in the movie,
right?
But Mark's opinion was that they might have been able to get a second shuttle up.
That was my thought.
Yeah, but
if they didn't have one ready, they might not have been able to do it.
Yeah, and it's not like they've done something like that
before,
that would be
so
never
that
done
doesn't mean
before.
that it would have worked.
Right.
You know, so.
They had spacesuits on there, but they didn't have EVA suits, and so like he's like, well, they could have done an inspection where they kind of just flung themselves around the orbiter tethered.
Right.
But, you know, even that, it's like, you know, that's a very dangerous thing. So,
absolutely.
But I guess what it comes down to for him is like, well, somebody knew at NASA that there was a big problem, and he feels like even if there was no way to rescue them, you should have told them. Like, give them one chance to call home. You know what I mean?
Yeah, something.
That's his thing.
And not just saying everything is fine.
Yeah.
And that's it.
I think part of it too is if you go to any organization and you pick a random employee, they're going to complain about the bosses.
Of course.
So it's very hard.
Nothing is perfect.
Yeah.
Nothing's perfect.
So
and everyone's perspective is always going to be different.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So going forward, right? Space Coast. Are you looking at maybe doing another something similar, or what type of,
where do you go from here?
Do you do an Artemis 2, Artemis 3? Are you going to be covering any of that? Are you going to get into maybe Elon Musk with the Starship, because Starship is so big right now? Are you weighing any of that stuff? Are you looking at anything?
I have to say, honestly, part of what the genesis of the project as well was man, I really just want to make something that Elon will see. Because,
it sounds
Elon
like our
doesn't
everyday.
listen to this show.
No, I know. But
hey!
during COVID, there was just a handful of people who emerged as sort of honest brokers. I felt like he was one of them. But that's why in every shot there's either a rocket or a baby. It's
Right. Elon loves it.
It's not so much about him, but about sort of a lot of the feelings and inspiration that we've all kind of been congealing around. Just wanting to give America something to be hopeful about for the future. But I would say that Space Coast 2 could be about the first Starship launch from Kennedy's Space Center, Cape Canaveral.
Right. But some people don't know that that's going to happen.
So they have the tower almost fully constructed up there.
Amazing.
And they are going to do Starship from Florida if the EPA, they can get permission. But I think really what it comes down to is we're telling stories about people, and there has to be an emotional point of view. Right. Yeah. And so until I have that, I wouldn't know what the story would be. However, I would say that I'd like to do a narrative now. Because documentary, even when I make a documentary, I try to make it exciting and like a narrative. Yeah. And I think this could be a good jumping off point to do a feature movie about a shuttle mission of some kind, but something fictional, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I really do think that Starship will probably end up being that vehicle that makes it to the moon, not Artemis, obviously. That's just, talking. And if that is the case, in your lifetime, you will definitely be able to make a movie like 1969, getting to the moon. Yeah. Right? Which I think would be the biggest patriotic, talking about a massive event, right? I think that would be something that would be awesome.
Maybe that's a question for you guys. Do you think that when we land on the moon again and whoever it is steps on the moon, do you think it will have the same impact that it did back then? Or do you think kids will care as much? I don't know.
Sometimes I think I do, and sometimes I think I don't. I think that it could be, if it's being shared, the process along the way.
Yeah. And doesn't just jump up on people.
Out of nowhere, because everyone, their head is in technology. They're just not, if it's not fast enough, even when they get it that fast, it's still not sinking in.
It doesn't stick.
Yeah. And I mean, it's like marketing. I think it has to be marketed, it has to be presented, it has to be talked about. And the current way that things are, we don't talk about being patriotic anymore. We don't talk about being American. We're all from different backgrounds. I mean, I'm Puerto Rican, but I am American, and you should be proud of that. And so it has to be something that involves people from the beginning step. When you're baking a cake, you're going to start with this, that, until you get to.
I think a lot of it will have to do with the news organizations. The news organizations are so focused on the negativity of stuff. They're not focused on patriotism. They're not focused on anything good.
I guess there's no angle in it for them.
There's no angle, but sadly, why is it? Because back then, even with the president,
it was the top story.
JFK, top story. We're doing it not because it's easy. We're doing it because it's damn hard, and we're going to do it because we're going to be the first on the moon.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things. Not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win, and the others too.
So the same thing would have to happen now. We'd have to gather the people together and say, look, this is something that the U.S. has done, and we are first, or let's say we're doing it for a second time. This is a big, big deal, So if it's Elon and it's private, and that's how it ends up getting there, I mean, I'm okay with it. It doesn't have to be NASA because it's still U.S., right? It's still us, like us as a people.
But
I think a lot of it has to do with news.
You know, the top. You know how they say everything starts at the top. So, I mean, right now it's political. Everything is from the top. So when you have a president who is patriotic about his country and his people, then I think, you know.
Well, definitely the division between SpaceX and the NASA. It's no secret that when you talk to people, they will tell you that like Starship is being intentionally slowed down for political reasons, because they want Artemis to have its time in the sun. And we've talked about how that competition can be good. But when I go out and I talk to people who aren't already familiar with Artemis and that we're doing a new moon mission, there's kind of zero recognition from the public.
Yeah, they don't even know what Artemis is.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Really?
They don't.
They know what Elon's.
They know what Elon is, yeah. And I think there is one cool thing, Fab, maybe this is kind of what you were talking about, but there's a cool project called Dear Moon. I don't know if you've heard of this, but there's a billionaire, I think he might be Japanese. I might be wrong. But anyway, it's called the Dear Moon Project, and they've already paid and booked, I think, a Starship ride to take a bunch of influencers and artists for a lunar flyby.
Yes.
And everyday
creatives,
astronaut.
all creatives,
Yeah, and that astronaut guy, everyday astronaut who does a bunch of cool coverage is going to go. So Artemis 1, the Orion capsule did a moon flyby. So they already got the capsule to go around the moon. I believe Artemis 2 is going to have people in the capsule, but a flyby again. And then Artemis 3 was supposed to be the landing. And it was supposed to be a NASA lander. But since the time of me making the movie and now, there have been some developments to where I think they're going to just try to do the landing with Starship. But it will still be like Starship booked by the Artemis program.
Right.
So, yeah, I think you're right. There's no Kennedy giving the speech at Texas moment.
Right. You don't have
it's
the
very
head guy,
important.
right?
Yeah.
Our president is the head guy.
Yeah.
The head guy is going to be your patriotic guy. So we haven't really had a head guy that was like, I mean, when you talk about the space program being shut down way back, I mean, you want to talk about like just cutting off a piece of the flag?
Yeah.
I mean, that's how I look at it. Like how?
Well, you mean when they shut down the shuttle program?
Yeah. Like that was a big hit.
That's interesting though, because I think that, you
didn't hear really much about stuff.
Well, they're supposed to have shut it down, but with something that was already in the line, it already worked.
Right, but
and that's not what happened.
I remember George W. at one of his State of the Unions. Prior to Artemis, they had a similar program called the Constellation Program. And that was supposed to be how we got to the moon and Mars.
Right.
And then I think it went away under Obama, and then they rebranded. They kind of rebranded it to Artemis.
And then we were supposed to take a hitch ride with the Russians.
That's what we were doing to get to the space station. Yeah.
I mean, when they shut down the space program, we were literally taking ISS, all of our cargo, as well as our astronauts, going to Russia and being launched.
So that doesn't feel
from
very
the Russians.
patriotic.
Like, how is that patriotic? You have the ISS up there, and you have to go to Russia to get your people and your goods.
We were Ubering.
We had exactly right. We had the Russian Uber.
Yeah. But I think what I learned from the space shuttle was that, in retrospect, it probably wasn't a safe way to get to space and back. Like they lost 2 out of 5, and it's like. Yeah, they did do a comeback, and they flew some more missions. Actually, something interesting Mark told me was that the design life of the shuttles was that they were actually supposed to still be flying now. They were supposed to get 300 flights out of them, and each one only had about 100. I think I could be wrong about the numbers there, but and then they did do a brief comeback to fulfill their obligations to the space station, and then they kind of wound it down there. And I think it's just because, we're a very litigious society. We lost 2 shuttles and those astronauts. I don't see them. My producer brain turns on, and it's like, I don't see them getting insurance for that.
I mean, you can only lose people so many times when you're like, okay, that's enough.
Right.
And I guess the issue was this debris kind of striking the shuttle, and it happened multiple times over all the shuttle missions. Just this one was a very bad one. And I guess the way they remedied it after that was that every time the shuttle went up after that, it always had 2 Canadarms, which is what Sheetal from the movie works on.
Right.
And they had special platforms on them, and they had a repair kit, so that on future shuttle missions, they had the ability to do any repairs and inspections to the heat shield.
Right.
And in retrospect, it's kind of like, you didn't do that in the first place. It's
right. Why didn't you think of that?
No plan to fix the heat shield. I guess they just thought that it was too impossible if something did go wrong. But anyway, all that is to say, it's like maybe it was time for it to wind down. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Or maybe it was time to re-innovate.
Yeah, we didn't have anything ready to replace it. Yeah.
And they always would come back with the money aspect.
Yeah.
So, they would always cut down the budget on the thing.
Less
so
and less and less and less.
But then you see how SpaceX is able to do more with less.
Right.
So maybe the winding down of the shuttle program in the end was for the best. We don't really. Is that,
I say this.
Zen master, right?
Yeah. That's true. I say this on the show all the time. I said, listen, people that are like at odds with Elon and that he has so much control over, let's say, global politics because of what he has now with Starlink, right? Well, you formed a vacuum. He filled the vacuum.
Yeah, exactly.
You created that vacuum, and now he filled it. Don't get pissed about it because you didn't have to have a vacuum. You just created one. And then what happened was Elon said, listen, I can get your cargo. I can get your astronauts to the ISS, no problem. They signed the contract, boom, within, I think it was less than a month, he had astronauts and cargo on the ISS, perfect. Using, I think it was the Falcon 9 or something. So, I mean, that just goes to show that like all of this time went by, we're using the Russians, like you said, Uber, we're Ubering with the Russians when we didn't really need to. But once again, there's this vacuum, and now you get someone that is a genius, sees the vacuum and says, you know what, I'm going to fill it. And he filled it, and he did a really good job at it. So now they're like pissed over themselves, basically. Right. It's like, don't get upset. You could have, it didn't need to be like this.
Right. There is a lot of weird, like, sentiment flowing back and forth between NASA and SpaceX sometimes. I don't quite understand, but maybe that's just part of the competition aspect that's healthy.
I think it's good. I really do. I think it's good. Any closing things that you kind of
we didn't talk about?
Like to add?
We should do the let's eat the food.
You know what? Let me bring this into it. Now this is cool.
Okay.
Let me show you that.
We'll just do some show and tell. Yeah. This is the Artemis.
Wait, should I get a dish for that?
I think we just do it like the astronauts.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. That's fine.
Here we have the Artemis mission patch.
See, that's very patriotic.
I love that.
I love that.
Kind of a Wonder Woman vibe.
Yeah, I mean, I do archery, and I have a long bow, so that's right up my alley. And the red, white, and blue. I mean,
that's awesome. And then, of course, you have to bring. You can't.
Got some astronaut ice cream here.
You have to have astronaut ice cream.
We've been giving this out of the screen.
Now, if you don't know what astronaut ice cream is,
you're missing out.
I'll tell you a behind-the-scenes story about astronaut ice cream too, because everybody knows about having these at camp or going to museums as a kid. But what Mark told me was they tried these once on the space shuttle, and the crumbs were a disaster.
Really?
And they don't. This is just for people at Kennedy Space Center now. The crumbs just go everywhere. Yeah,
that's funny.
So there you go. The insider scoop. Astronaut ice cream is a no-go.
Not really. That's why we have stuff more like this.
This is going to be exciting.
All right, guys. So
where's your dad?
You know what?
Where's your dad? Joe's dad is Sicilian.
Oh, okay.
So everything is written in Russian, okay? And what's interesting here is what you pointed out to me earlier, is this looks like the space shuttle. Matter of fact, maybe I'll put an image of it here, there, or elsewhere after. I'll take a close-up of it. But it looks like the space shuttle. And I didn't know this. The Russians actually created a space shuttle, literally a lookalike. It looks like the space shuttle. The entire thing.
It's called the Baran. It was called the Baran.
So the astronauts that were going to be on the space shuttle, which never were going to eat this. And this, one of the things. And this is Sicilian pizza.
Yeah.
In I guess in like a tube.
Yeah, and we're gonna try this.
We're gonna try this.
All right, we're gonna do it. If it's horrible, I'm gonna blame this.
Gotta use my space pen to get this open.
Yes.
All right. And you can order this stuff. Yeah. Oh my gosh, it's like feels Soviet.
Is it radioactive?
It's all in Russian. I mean, you just get it. I think it's fine. All right. It does say it does say Sicilian pizza space food ingredients: pork ham, high grade wheat flour, cheese, tomatoes, oil, powdered red pepper, salt, dried yeast, basil, and water.
There you go.
Recommended to use product in a heated state. Okay, we didn't placing the tube in hot water. Oh, we didn't heat it.
We didn't heat it.
All right, you guys are off the hook then.
So we don't want to eat the raw.
No, we could cook it.
Pizza. Yeah. We'll cook it.
Okay.
We're going to do it.
Yeah.
But look at this. This is it's just cool. I mean, it's all Russian. I mean, and I didn't know about this, that they actually created a space shuttle.
It's so thick, yeah, so you can heat it up in some water. Yeah. But how'd they do that in space, though?
Right? How would they actually heat it?
This is fishy. Yeah, I don't know if that's...
Yeah, I don't know.
Maybe they would just eat it out of the tube.
What
that sounds
about
gross.
like heating it, like, kettle with hot water? And
maybe.
It says it is forbidden to heat the tube in the microwave, and it says that is dangerous.
So it is metal.
Yeah, so this seems like it's kind of a scam. I don't know. They wouldn't be able to boil water in space.
I don't know. Would they? Would they not?
We need to call the Kremlin.
I guess so. I mean, I'm just going to do it the way the way the astronauts had to, I guess. Although it's got one of these like, I need to pierce this. Do you have a screwdriver?
Wait, no.
Oh
here,
my God.
The
Oh yeah.
See, that's how they did it. It's always like designed to work. Oh my God. Okay.
Is it awful? Does it smell good?
It smells awful.
Oh my God! Hold on.
All right, I'm gonna go first. Come on, you guys.
That does not smell good.
It looks like. Yeah.
It smells like a.
All right.
Smells like baby food, like the turkey ham baby food.
Turkey ham baby food.
Yeah.
Oh gosh.
Ooh.
I'm putting that cap on right away.
Oh my God.
That's terrible.
Wait.
If you're hungry and it's warm, you're gonna eat it.
Oh no. Oh no. No. Wait. It has no. It has almost like a fish. Like it almost tastes like a tuna to it. Am I just tasting
it? Has a tuna consistency.
It does have that.
Yeah.
It tastes like tuna or something.
Yeah. Well, like I said, if you're hungry enough.
All right. So my dad comes
God
from
bless
Sicily.
America.
Yeah. So my dad is from Sicily, from Palermo, and this is not the Sicilian pizza that I know.
No.
That's all that I know.
That would not work.
Oh God.
All right, you want the ice cream? Wash it down.
Yeah. Let's get the ice cream
Some
going
Neapolitan here.
It's Neapolitan. All right. So let's see. Does it make crumbs? That's the thing.
It's already crumbing all over your studio here. Yeah.
Fabulous. Is it going to float in the air? Look at that. It looks legit though, like a real ice cream.
So they're right. Look at all these crumbs.
Yeah, that's why.
So this would be just
it's
like floating
dehydrated.
throughout the.
Makes sense.
It's like a concept thing.
So what would they do? They would. Do they have like little vacuums? You just like vacuum the air, like
I
as
don't know.
I've never seen that. I just think
It fell apart.
Fabio, look at this. So yeah, you'd have all of these little pieces.
Going for the chocolate.
There we go.
You going chocolate?
Yeah.
Okay, I got.
I mean, it tastes like strawberry. Like.
Oh, I got strawberry.
This is better than this.
Yeah, way better.
Oh yeah, that actually tastes like.
Yeah, like
Yeah,
a
I do that.
Neapolitan ice cream.
Yeah, that's not bad. Yeah.
It's doable. The kids would love it.
Yeah.
All right, so we've proven that the American space program is superior from a culinary
Much
standpoint.
superior.
Yeah.
Much. Yeah, that is tuna in a can. I don't even know what they're doing there. But yeah, I can definitely see how all of these pieces would be a problem.
I wouldn't feed my dog this.
No. I'm glad we ate it though.
Yeah.
We tried.
Oh God. So let me finalize with where are you going to be? I know you've been in a lot of festivals already.
Yeah.
You're going to more. You're going to be in California. You're going all over the place.
You already won the
Yes.
Jacksonville.
Yeah, that's true. We won.
Matter of fact, I'll put a picture of it here. You won,
Yeah.
right? Jacksonville, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But for the best Florida film, which is very rewarding because I kind of also made the movie as a love letter to Florida.
Yeah.
Right.
I'd been living in California, and during COVID, just had to come back and just.
Yeah.
Florida's much maligned, as I said earlier.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
but people don't get it.
Yeah, no.
Right.
Like what I like to say at the film festivals, what's so great about Florida is if you're walking on a beach town in Florida and you see some old guy, some silver fox tuning up his motorcycle, it's a high probability that that's a guy who helped, put up the International Space Station or polish the mirror on
Right.
the Hubble Space Telescope.
Amazing. Yeah.
So that's our heritage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But spacecoastmovie.com, you can find all the information about it. Follow me on X. We're doing Beverly Hills Film Festival. We've got best place to is just go to the website. We're playing in multiple cities, so try to see it in a theater, and then hopefully after that we'll get it on a distributor somewhere.
Yeah.
And I'll play probably during this interview. Maybe I'll put in some little excerpts, some behind the scenes, some B-roll that I've gotten from Justin, and then so you guys can see a little bit of what's going on. But it was awesome. It was absolutely awesome. Thank you for being
Thank you
here.
for having me.
I'm sure everyone has enjoyed it. And guys, listen. If you have any questions, right, in the comments, put those questions. And Justin said he's very nice about this. He's going to get in there and answer any of the questions that you have.
That is
I think
cool.
that's very important because our community has become really tight and everyone is just so nice. So I say this all the time. I literally have to ban or delete no one anymore.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's been months and months and months where you get that.
Let's
the
see if we
troll.
can pump those numbers up, guys.
Yeah. So we're at 93.
I'm going to answer the rudest comments first.
Yes. Yeah. So anyways, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for
having
Justin.
me. Really
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
All
Awesome.
right, awesome. This
You
is
guys
great.
We'll
Going
just get.
again?
Yeah, no, I'm not doing that. I cannot
Unless
do
you want
that.
to put it in hot water inside.
Yeah.
I don't think it's necessary.
This is not going to. This is not going to be eaten. But this is a great souvenir. It's in Russian, and there's.
is awesome.
But you know what? There is a dog. So we should have known
That's
that
a pig, I think.
Is it
Is it a
Yeah.
pig?
a boar?
It is a pig. Holy hell! But you know what? They should have a tuna on here. They should. I don't know. It doesn't taste like pig.
You know what's funny? I thought the one I ordered was French fries, but the one that arrived was Sicilian pizza. So
They just put anything in there. Just like
guess
whatever.
so.
They just send you whatever
That's
they
funny.
have.
That's
Oh my
great.
god.
yeah.
That was
But thanks for
awesome.
trying that. That was terrible.
No,
That was
it
really
good.
bad.
That was funny.